こんにちは。大乱闘スマッシュブラザーズディレクター、空の桜井正宏です。
Masahiro Sakurai is definitely my favorite game designer, game director, and voice actor, apparently.
King TDD!
I love Super Smash Bros. In 2002, I was 6 years old. My father came in with a McDonald's paper bag, and with the Happy Meal came a GameCube. I know, I was the happiest birthday boy, but Melee was my first proper introduction to video games. And man, I couldn't have hoped for a better one. My eyes opened when I saw Captain Falcon for the first time. I mean, look at him in HD and tell me you don't feel anything. I'm not gonna talk too much about Sakurai's life, as other content creators have done it in much better ways than I could ever do it. So if you want to know more about him, I'd recommend watching Did You Know Gaming's video, or this lovely video from the folks over at Video Game Storytime. With that said, let's just do a quick recap of who he is for the sake of context. In 1989, Masahiro Sakurai created Kirby at HAL Laboratory when he was only 19. He essentially designed and directed the development of Kirby's Dreamland for the Game Boy, meaning his first position in the games industry was director, which is insane. However, he's done one hell of a job, which led him to continue directing games for HAL Laboratory for about 10 years. During that time, he co-created Super Smash Bros. With his mentor Satoru Iwata, who was at the head of HAL at the time and later became the president of Nintendo. He also met his wife Michiko, who worked there as a UI designer. In 2005, the couple funded Sora Limited, their own agency, so they could work as freelancers for various clients. And by various clients, you and I know what that means. Even if he worked on different projects for the first year, it wasn't long until Nintendo came to him saying, "Hey, do you happen to do anything for the next 4 years? Because we gotta put Sonic in Smash." Sakurai has been praised for directing and essentially creating one of the most influential and popular franchises in the world. And as much as I love the Super Smash Bros. Series, I also love the other games he directed. The other titles he's worked on may not have had the same worldwide impact, but I think they mean a lot to a smaller batch of people. Sakurai is now 50 years old. He hasn't worked on anything else than Smash Bros. For almost 10 years. He's had health issues since 2013 and has mentioned retiring in 2015. He's reached the limits of his exhausted body several times. And at this point, I don't know if he'll ever work on anything else than Smash Bros. Before he retires. I've been consuming and digesting dozens of articles and interviews about Sakurai this past month, reading insights about his game design philosophies, his life, his struggles, but I felt like I needed to go the extra step. He said that he thinks developers shouldn't get the spotlight and instead let their games do the talking. So let's do just that. Let's dive in and explore his craft to better understand his game design philosophies outside of Smash Bros. I've replayed and analyzed 5 of his games to better understand the fundamental design bricks they're made of. Everything is based on my own history with these games, my own game design philosophies, and the general knowledge I have of Sakurai based on his different interviews and appearances online. Anyway, let's start with the game that started it all. Sakurai was only 19 when he came up with Kirby. Kirby is Sakurai's first creation. To him, games were getting increasingly more difficult to play. There were more and more inputs and games were just more complicated in general. Well, wait and see what's coming, buddy. Kirby's Dreamland is a Game Boy platformer inspired by Mario. HAL Laboratory wanted to make a game that would appeal to both beginners and seasoned players. Sakurai was interested in making a one-button game that everybody could play. However, the video game market wouldn't allow such a game to be commercialized. He couldn't make something that simple, but simplicity and accessibility are what drove most of his design decisions. He shared his idea for Kirby, and development started. The original Super Mario Bros. On the NES is a fairly difficult game, even if it is easy to pick up and understand. Sakurai wanted to make a more forgiving experience, so he had to analyze and find what made Mario so difficult. I tried to do the same thing and I got 4 major points. First, it's a pretty fast-paced game. Then, without power-up, Mario dies in a single hit. Each power-up grants you an additional hit, which means that a beginner player that doesn't know where to get the power-ups or loses them really fast will most likely spend most of their playtime with Tiny Mario. Then, pits are pretty common, and falling in one results in an instant death. And finally, Mario has to land on his enemies to defeat them. But he also gets hurt if an enemy touches him in any other way, which means that the line between the win state and the fail state is really thin. A slight difference in the angle will defeat Mario. That's what makes the game so engaging even to this day. Every time you jump on an enemy, you always have that tension. You're always wondering if you got it right. Now Sakurai had to address all of these points, which gave its trademark characteristics to Kirby. The game has a slower pace. Kirby has a health gauge and can heal by eating food scattered in the levels. There are still pits in the levels, it's a platformer after all, but to make traversal easier, Sakurai gave Kirby the ability to fly, making pretty much any obstacle much less of a threat. A player that wants to have an easy time can just fly over everything and get to the end of the level. As a placeholder at the time, Kirby was a little ball with hands and feet. To prototype the flying mechanic, they just inflated him like a balloon. Finally, Kirby doesn't have to be close to his enemies to defeat them. Now, the most obvious solution to allow a character to defeat his enemies at a distance would be to shoot a projectile. That's Mario's power-up when he gets the Fire Flower. Giving Kirby a projectile would have made for a completely different game. It would be similar to run-and-gun games like Contra or Metal Slug, and that's not what we want. When starting the creation of Kirby, Sakurai already had a basic idea. He wanted to make an action game where you utilize your enemies. In Kirby, you can take down your enemies in 3 ways, each way requiring an extra step. 1 step, immediately inhale what's in front of you, but stop moving for a short moment. 2 steps, inhale an enemy and enter a new state. Kirby becomes slower but can shoot a long-range projectile. 3 steps, fly up, shoot an air pellet and fall down. You lose a bit of control during the fall but can float back up after a short duration, acting as a natural cooldown. In that way, Kirby is friendlier. You can always choose how you're going to approach an enemy, and all of these actions leave you at a somewhat safe distance. To avoid giving Kirby too much power, the projectiles have to be earned. Each action has a downside, but these downsides are really cleverly thought out and animated to feel very natural. In Kirby's Dreamland, you can also find 2 power-ups. The Super Spicy Curry, which lets you shoot air pellets on the ground instead of inhaling, making the game feel like a run and gun as mentioned before, and the Mint Leaf, which improves the range of your air pellets and allows you to shoot as many as you want without falling, making the game feel like a shoot 'em up. So they kind of work like Mario's Fire Flower, and you feel powerful because for a moment you can break the constraints of the core mechanics. So I didn't know where to place that in the script, but I wanted to talk about it, so fun fact number 1. Kirby was originally supposed to fly off-screen when defeated, an idea that was then used in Smash Bros, but Sakurai claims he didn't even remember it. Fun fact number 2, the enemies in the game that fall from the edge or platforms or climb down stairs do not have an actual collision detection. Sakurai wrote each enemy's individual movement path in hexadecimal. Fun fact number 3, which isn't that fun actually, but the game was made on a twin Famicom. The console didn't have a keyboard support, so the game was entirely coded with a trackball and each character was put in with a virtual keyboard. I'm not gonna go deeper into Kirby's Dreamland as everything else is pretty much just level design. And who fucking cares about that? Because I just spent 5 minutes talking about the core mechanics and I didn't even mention the copyability. Kirby's Adventure is a sequel that came out for the NES a year later in 1993. And yes, the Super NES was already out for over 2 years. Originally, HAL Laboratory wanted to port Kirby's Dreamland, but one of the major criticisms the game received was that it was too easy. So Sakurai decided to make a new game instead. And this game ain't gonna be no baby game. It's Kirby's Adventure! When I launched the game for the first time, I was really surprised. I mean, look at it! Why am I even trying to get a PS5 when we got this peak of human accomplishment? People look at the pyramids and they say, there's no way human made that, it's gotta be the aliens. Well, I mean, that's bullshit, but then I look at Kirby, and I gotta say, I kinda get it. That would make perfect sense. This is, without a doubt, the most beautiful game on the console. Just to be clear, this is what an NES game usually looks and sounds like. I mean, just look at Kirby's animations. It's so fluid and polished. The presentation is so clean, the UI at the bottom's got cute little animations too. This is, like, honestly, this is the Red Dead Redemption 2 of the NES, bending the console's limit to its breaking point. It's awesome! Now, in this game, a few mechanics were added. If you double tap the D-pad left or right, you can run faster, which is a pretty advanced level of sophistication for NES inputs, and it stems from the fact that both the A and B buttons were already taken for jumping and inhaling. Another new move is the slide. You can crouch by pressing down, and then pressing the A or B button will perform a slide. It can be used to quickly destroy obstacles, knock out enemies, or dodge some attacks. These two mechanics give more options to the player and help offer faster and more expressive gameplay. If you inhale several enemies at once, you can shoot a more powerful projectile, which rewards positioning and timing and adds a small extra layer of risk-reward. Now onto the main new mechanic that everyone's waiting for, the copy ability. What the copy ability does to Kirby's moveset is it replaces half of his offensive abilities. Copying an ability replaces the inhale and shoot mechanics to something else, a new ability with its own properties and constraints. As a player, you make different decisions depending on the options that you have. Regularly changing Kirby's moveset is a great way to keep the player engaged. It also means that each time Kirby inhales an enemy, you can choose between absorbing it and maybe copy its ability if it has one, or shooting it as a projectile. The copy will be beneficial in the future, but the projectile might get you out of a tough spot. It also helps with replayability, as you can go through the same levels with different abilities and you'll have a different experience. Finally, since the game is more difficult than the previous one, it's a way to make the game accessible to both beginners and advanced players. It adds a layer of Kirbyosity, and I'm personally the type of player who's driven by curiosity, and I always wonder what could be the next ability that I'll get. A new player will try out every ability and find fun in that. An advanced player will try and use the right ability at the right time. 3 one-button minigames were also added, so beginner players could enjoy really simple moments between tougher stages. This is Sakurai's second game, and this is where he came up with his main design philosophy that he called Kirbyism. And it has 2 pillars. The first one is a pretty common game design practice that focuses on making simple mechanics which result in a deep gameplay experience. Most games try to achieve that, others don't give a damn. I'm talking about you, Monster Hunter. Think Tetris. The game has one really simple mechanic, but it has a richness and depth that makes it one of the most influential games ever. But usually, whatever the game is, it's always a good thing to have this in mind. The second pillar is more interesting to me, as it is Sakurai's own personal agenda as a creator. He wants his games to provide value to anyone. Most games settle on a pretty narrow target audience. I'm gonna take an extreme example, but the Souls games, they target a pretty small part of the gamer population. It's not for everyone, most players will hate it, and it's fine. That's what the creators envisioned, and I think there's value in that. Sakurai doesn't want to do that. He seems to have a broad vision from the beginning that encapsulates a huge cast of players, and he designs the game around that. In one of his columns on Famitsu magazine, he said, "That's because I don't really make moves based on personal desires to make new games or direct titles. My intention is basically to do work that other people will enjoy. If that wasn't the case, I wouldn't have made Kirby, a game aimed at beginners despite being well versed in games myself." The next Kirby, Kirby Superstar, is the most memorable one to me. Mainly because I was playing it in co-op with a friend, but also because it's such a unique and interesting format and it does get weird at times. I think this must be one of the Kirby games that most people remember now. Today, Sakurai doesn't work on Kirby games anymore, but they still follow the same vision. And it is one of Nintendo's flagship platformers, aimed towards beginner players and people who want to have a grand old chill time, followed by the age-old Mario series and the challenging Donkey Kong. For a couple years, Sakurai worked on a little series of games called Super Smash Bros. You might have heard of it, but I'm not gonna talk about that, at least not for now. After Smash 64 and Melee, Sakurai's next game offered a different kind of experience. An experience I haven't stopped thinking about ever since it came out in 2004. I'm talking about Kirby Air Ride. It's my boy Kirby. This will have to wait for the next video. I hope you've had a great time. These videos are super fun to make. I've already done most of the research and writing, so hopefully it doesn't take too long in between videos. But you know, if you don't want to miss the next one, you might want to. You can subscribe right here, right now. You can click that button. Quick shout out to my boy ChrisCross523 from Patreon. I'm super grateful that you believe in the content that I make, and that you've actually helped set up the Discord. You didn't have to, but you did, and I really appreciate it. I've kind of like revamped the Patreon so that it's clearer. I think like there were a lot of different like tiers and rewards, so I kind of streamlined it. You can check it out if you want, if you can financially, but this is a form of support that really means a lot, and that helps making videos like that. Friends, this will have to do for today. Thank you for watching to the end. Take care. That was the worst moment for it to... Jesus. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.